All right. From my alter ego, looking at my other computer, it looks like we're up and going. Phil, I'm looking at you on top. Can you nod if you can see the PowerPoint okay? All right, thanks. Well, welcome everyone. Uh, working with the technical commission, we wanted to do an update on where we are. We've learned a lot in the last couple of months since we spoke last. Want to give an update on USA Cycling, share some experience that we've seen as we've returned to Rodigan Racing, give an update on task force and what's happening with those, and we had talked last time about education. We're moving forward with that and are ready to share some info and start signing some people up for some courses. And then thought we would go ahead and do a question and answer. Again, we're mainly going to use the chat functionality for that. So if you can just become as familiar as you can with that as we go. I do want to point out we've got a couple of USA Cycling staff who are going to be helping me with the chat functionality. If you see an answer from Stuart Lamp or Tara McCarthy, they're both on, and they may jump in and help answer some questions. Missy did send a chat already. If you've not heard, Louise Bywater passed away recently. I also want to point out, I was going to bring this up, that John Asaro, who's one of our long-standing motor reps, also lost in the last few weeks. So I'm going to give it just a minute, a moment of silence for those folks before we get going. All right, Missy, and thanks for sending that out. I had that on the list, and always tough to lose officials we worked with for a long time. So I'd encourage you to, if you know Gary, reach out to him and offer your condolences. I want to move on and talk a little about a general USA Cycling update. Don't worry, you're not going to need to listen to me the whole time. We've got some other speakers coming up. Couple things that I want to point out. COVID continues to have an impact on the organization, as you would imagine, as well as society in general. We unfortunately had to reinstate the furloughs we went through earlier in the year. The main person that really affects that you all have worked with currently is Justin Evans. Justin is on furlough. Just so you know, we are covering his health insurance while he's out. We hope to have him back later this year. If you didn't know, Justin's also expecting, and I'll just point out that the baby registry is online if you want to hint. So we'll hopefully have him back soon. Currently, our operations department at the office is myself, Stuart Lamp, Tara McCarthy, Alicia Frazier, and Liz Kohler, and most of them are on the call. And I'll go into a little bit about contact information. We did begin permitting events again on June 1, as most folks have seen. We permitted just under 40 events in the month of June. That is down from several hundred that we normally do in June, so you can see the impact. These were all heavily modified, almost all heavily modified events, things like converting to time trial formats, much smaller field limits than we normally see, and other changes of location and date to meet local health mandates. And we'll talk a little more about that when we get into the COVID-19 portion. We are continuing to see event cancellations, even rolling into the cyclocross season. I think you all may have seen some announcements about some of the big cyclocross series. We're starting to hear from Pro CX races as well. And unfortunately, you're seeing a continued cancellation. That said, in many cases, it's for very good and valid reasons. And we very much respect the need for events to cancel or postpone to next year. Among those impacted was most of our summer national championships. That included most of our road championships, mountain bike nationals, pro nationals, and we just felt like in the end, with the types of events those were, with very large numbers of people, pretty restrictive formats, and the fact that people were traveling from all over the country, we couldn't conduct those safely. So we continue to move forward with trying all kind of alternatives. Tara McCarthy, who's on, worked very hard to look at different options. And in the end, I can tell you we made the decision. It was really hard for us to make, but we all slept well that night. I mean, I think it was the right thing to do, even though it was painful for us. Tara has been working on updating all of the officials assignments as we learn things. Those are hosted on the officials resource page. I hope you understand this has been very fast and furious, and sometimes that is not the first thing we update. If you can be patient with us, we are. I think it goes back to what we talked about. If you are a chief official with an event, you need to be in dialogue with that event in regards to being up to date on what's going on with the cancellations. Going to move on. We have updated the contact page for officials, indicating Justin is on temporary furlough. This is updated at the USA Cycling officials resource page. I'd recommend everyone just keep this handy on their phone or whatnot. And especially at an event, we're going to talk about some reasons you would want to contact us. And this, again, lists our operations staff as well as some other folks. I am monitoring Justin's email account, and also we are monitoring daily that officials at usacycling.org. If you have something you need an answer on very, very quickly from one of the staff, feel free to send that to our personal emails as well, because those come up immediately. But we do want to try to send non-essential traffic to that officials page, just because several of us have access to that. If someone's on vacation or out, other folks are looking at that. And again, you can download this on the officials resource page. I also just want to mention we are pretty much available 24/7 for especially emergencies or critical items. You know, Tara and Stewart, if they get calls at 10 o'clock at night,
no problem,
are much less likely to have an answer you're gonna like. I'm gonna mute someone who's, there we go. Yeah, please, after hours, just critical, important information. We're happy to take it at that time, but feel free to use those if you really need to. All right, moving on. A couple more things, and then I'm going to hand it over to some other folks. Our National Technical Commission, first I want to thank them for being very active and helpful in this time period. We're obviously pretty short-staffed in the office now, and they've really stepped up to help out. We did have a meeting a couple weeks ago, and we've reinstituted some of the leadership things that have sort of fallen through the cracks over the last few years. Tom Nee was elected chair by the NTC. So if you want to complain about me, feel free to go to Tom, and he'll give me a hard time. Dot has also stepped up to serve as vice chair. And you can see the other members there. The NTC really, we look for top officials who have a broad range of knowledge, who have different areas of expertise within the sport and officiating, and are as geographically dispersed as possible with those other criteria. Reach out to these folks as needed. A lot of them in your local community. Make suggestions. We're, again, being very active with this group, and they're passing on some really good information. We'll talk about the task force reports in a little bit, but during this time, we don't have the bandwidth to do everything we want, but I just want you all to know we are listening and trying to implement where possible and where feasible right now. And you're going to hear from Tom here in a little bit. All right, so probably the big thing since last time is we've learned quite a bit more about sort of working in and around COVID-19. I'm going to go over some generalities. We're going to have a couple of our officials who've been out in the field talk about their experiences and try to bring you guys up to speed. In addition, Tom's going to talk about what does an official do, what does an official not do and responsible for. I am going to follow this up with a memo to all our officials, sort of reiterating our viewpoints in USA Cycling's official position. That's probably going to go out to everybody on Monday, and we'll get that posted up on the website. We're going to cover most of those items here. So I think, big question has been what's officials' role at events, especially in regard to COVID-19. I think the first thing I want to bring up, and we've seen some great case studies where this has worked really well, is that dialogue between the chief referee and the organizer is critically important right now, more than at any time we've done. Understanding the pressures that an organizer is under, the requirements they're under, communicating how official staff is going to fit in, what health and safety requirements they need to be aware of, and frankly, how the crew is going to be fit in and taken care of in that is important. Give you an example, I'm helping out a little bit with the Colorado race here. Phil's is the president for that, has been very proactive, and Phil within a few hours should have their 20-page mitigation plan. I think he's already seen it. That dialogue is critically important back and forth between the organization and the chief referee. This is not the time to show up at the start line without having a discussion. And we'll talk a little more about the next aspect of what are officials in charge of versus what's the race organizer in charge of. We've taken a viewpoint, officials are not the health police. We're not asking officials to go check the hand sanitizer in the bathrooms. We're not asking officials to walk around with the county health guidelines and make sure that the organizer is following all those. Officials are over the sporting aspects of the event. And what we're finding is that in this day and age, those policies do overlap in certain areas. And we're going to have Michael Dupay talk a little about his experience with an event in Pennsylvania, as well as Sally Erfaher in a minute, who's working the Trexlertown facility, and sort of what their experience has been with handling that. But I think my point, we're going to reiterate this more with some case studies or some examples, is that there is a line that officials need to be involved with those health aspects, but it is not to enforce those for the county or state. And that leads to our next item. That's one reason we want you to have our contact information, whether it's pre-event, whether it is post-event, even if it's during the event. If you have an issue which you feel like is outside the purview of officials, but is a concern, it should be a call to myself, Stuart Lamp, Tara, or Valicia, and to let us know what's going on. If it's a pre-event, you have some concerns, it's not super time sensitive, that event services at usacycling.org email, you can send to that. We monitor that pretty constantly. I'd suggest Stuart Lamp is the first phone call or email directly, and then I'll be a follow-up to that because Stuart handles our event services. If you have something on event day that is a major issue that we need to talk about and that we possibly need to make permit enforcement on, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and call one of us at any time. If you don't get us, leave a message and work down the list. And again, that's for critical information, critical items that you can't resolve on your own or you feel like are outside the purview. As well, we really appreciate comments, and I want to thank, we've had 3 or 4 officials work races in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Sent us really good follow-up information, which has helped us both inform how we work with events and some of the requirements we're putting on us, as well as help form our sort of working relationship between officials and those organizers. And you're going to hear from a couple of those folks right now. So again, we're going to follow this up with a little more detailed information in a memo. And with that, Michael, I am going to unmute you if you can't unmute yourself. And Michael worked the pickle juice criterium, I believe it's called. They were an interesting event, and the state of Pennsylvania currently actually requires masks during competition, which, as you can imagine, is interesting. It's the only event I know of that we've had that they've required during competition, and I'm sure someone will chat with me and tell me I'm wrong. But Michael, you want to talk a little about your experience and your communications and whatnot?
Yeah, we knew 2 or 3 weeks ago that the race was going to happen, and first thing I did was make sure that they were following the USAC recommendations, made sure the promoter saw the recommendations that we had. And so on race day, most of that was taken care of. The mask requirement came in on July 1st. So we only had 3 or 4 days to come up with a plan of action for masked racers. And talking with our local association and the promoter and a couple of racers, the determination that I came up with was that we came up with would be to treat the masks like helmets. And so we kind of shoehorned the mask requirement from the state into the USAC rules by addressing it as a necessary piece of safety equipment. And as I explained to the riders on the line and through the promoter with an email, the day before, 2 days before the race, we treat it like a helmet where it has to be worn properly. It has to be worn whenever possible. We did allow accommodations for feeding. You can pull the mask down to drink, but it was supposed to be pulled up right away. We did have compliance issues. I addressed every field before at the pre-race announcements about how we expected it to be only taken away during the feeding time. But of course, we did have the very first category, 55 plus men's race. A rider probably spent half the race, maybe a third of the race, refusing to wear his mask. It was a refusal issue. He ended up being disqualified, which bad at the start, but it was also a good example for the rest of the fields to know that we were going to treat it seriously. And then the next race was the elite men's race, and the rider that won that race had the mask pulled down below his nose. And what happened there was we ended up relegating him to last place in his field. We didn't know if it was incidental. We didn't know if it was intentional to have, the mask below his nose and get that advantage. So it wasn't as severe of a penalty. So that was a little bit different. It was a little bit different challenge. But everyone appreciated that we were taking it seriously. No problems for the rest of the day. The way that I explained it was that it's a rider's responsibility to make sure the mask fits properly. If the rider had come across the line with his helmet strap unstrapped, what would be the consequences? And then they were able to appreciate that was, we're looking out for the safety of the other riders as well as their own safety to make sure that everyone was properly covered. I did all this with talking with the local association and with the promoter, so they knew what was coming. They could address it before race day, which I thought was important. There was no pre-registration, or I'm sorry, no day of registration. So all riders were pre-registered, so they could get all the critical information ahead of time through emails from the promoter. So no one's really surprised. The one thing we did find was that the evolution, the designs of the different masks were pretty interesting. We had 3 distinct styles. We had the surgical style, like a surgical mask, which is regular mask that goes around the ears. That was probably the most popular. The second most popular was the buff, that comes up and covers the nose and the mouth, and then the riders can then pull it down to drink. And probably the most interesting, and I think arguably the most successful, was the face shield, which riders developed. And it was a panel of cloth that went across the bridge of their nose and was pinned onto their helmet straps. And then the material draped down below their chin. And in that case, the riders could then put the water bottle up underneath the shield and drink, but without having to pull down or roll up their masks. And that was probably the most interesting, and that was most successful. I think that it was easiest for the riders to get it out of the way, and it made sure they kept their face covered. I spent a lot of my race day yelling at riders, cover your nose, pull your mask down. A lot more policing than I really wanted to do, but it's a new thing.
Great, thanks, Mike. I want to point out a couple things. Number one, Michael had reached out to us and me in particular once they, and this was pretty quickly, as he mentioned, for the event, once they figured out that that was going to be, again, a local health mandate to actually wear the mask during the event. And we discussed how to treat this, and Stuart's put this up on text to you. The organizer did communicate this as soon as they know. We talked about how to enforce it and chose that helmet rule with the usual, you know, a mask slipping down and immediately being put back up is different from someone refusing to wear it when requested to. And I also mentioned, you know, Michael communicated quite a bit with the race organization. We received very positive feedback from the organizer about the interaction with the officials crew. And so Michael, thank you for that. And they have another event coming up very shortly. And Michael, I think you're back there, but now there is a little more time, a little more knowledge. I think this is a moderately extreme example. Again, it's probably, I think it's the only event I've heard of that required usage during the event itself. And that is the mandate. So it's the state mandate, which makes it a permit mandate. And again, makes it a special regulation for the event that has been communicated to the riders. And a couple of questions have come up. Michael, this was a conversation that was agreed upon by everybody and communicated to the riders. So it was an officiating call, but it was a special regulation implemented by the organization. And we're going to have Tom Nee in a minute go into some sort of case studies on how you should work on this as an official based on the experience. So Michael, I appreciate it. I'm going to put you back on mute. And Sally Urfer, who apparently has had a pretty rough commute home from work. She was worried she wasn't going to make it. Did. And Sally, you are... Hopefully I'm able to, can you try to, okay, I got you unmuted. And Sally works a lot at T-Town. That organization is worked pretty closely with us, with the county health department, implemented a lot of really cool stuff. And his, well, I'll let Sally go into the specifics, but I think in general, there's a bit of a base case scenario on what we see with organizers. So Sally, you want to take over and talk about your experiences there?
Sure. Well, we are lucky that we have Joan Hanscom as the executive director. So she had worked very well with the county, who actually owns the land, and the local health network that I actually work for, to create a plan. And her plan is very, it's out there, it's very lengthy. It even gets into how the governor is handling athletes and professional athletes down to amateur athletes. And we are not requiring them to wear masks at T-Town. We're doing mostly time trials. Joan is doing all pre-reg. They're coming in 10 at a time, and they're getting their temperatures checked. They're going through all the COVID questions, and then they're allowed to come in. It's one-way traffic into the track. And as one athlete leaves, the next athlete's allowed to come in. We're also following all of the state's mandates, where if you live in the 15 states in the Southwest, or you're visiting any of the 15 states in the Southwest area that are having spikes, you get to stay home. You're not allowed to come in. So when people arrive at the velodrome, they're screened, their temps are taken, and they're able to come in. They are not allowed to warm up inside the velodrome, so they need to do that in the parking lot, and they need to stay distanced. Joan has a staff member out in the parking lot calling people in, where we have a radio connection to him, And they'll come across the track, and then they get to sit and social distance as well. They're to be wearing their masks at all times until they're ready to race. So you're saying contactless. For the most part, we have a volunteer who's a coach who does wear a mask and is wearing gloves and is hand sanitizing in between every hold. So we're not doing foot down for time trials. He is holding them. And the officials are giving the instructions. All of them are wearing their masks. So if a judge is up on the judge's stand and doing timing from the judging stand, she's alone up there. So she doesn't have to wear her mask, but she is. If she's sitting in the sun and is getting the sun beating on her for the 7 hours that we're there, and she's alone on the top of the track, yes, they can take their mask off. No one's around them. They're not getting anywhere near people. Me, who was doing instructions, I was wearing a mask the whole time, except for when I was drinking or eating. And I was giving the instructions to the athletes, whipping for the athletes, and it all flowed flawlessly. I mean, Joan has to be commended for everything that she did in getting everything working perfectly. And I can tell you that I went through 3 paper masks in 6 hours. So it gets really hot. It's about 10 degrees hotter in the velodrome than it is outside the velodrome. And so I went out and I bought a sweat wicking mask, which was a godsend for me. And we had hand sanitizer available to all of us. We did not do any paper except for the original start sheets for the officials. We printed our own at home, brought it in. All results were posted at Track Timing Live or Live Track Timing, I don't remember which way it goes, that we use at national championships. So we weren't posting results. People were not lingering. They were not looking at results. They were getting it almost immediately on their phone. So hopefully the rain will stop, which it's not supposed to since a hurricane's on the East Coast. We may or we may not be racing tomorrow. All right, anything else you need, Chuck?
No, Sally, I appreciate it. I'm going to put you on mute and we'll unmute you if you have any questions. A couple things I want to point out. Both these events we've talked about are in Pennsylvania. The difference being, and this came not from us, but from the health departments, was that the criterion, it was felt apparently by the health departments that you could not appropriately social distance in the field itself, and thus the requirement for usage during competition. At the velodrome, as Sally alluded to, these were time trials, so the allowance was made not to have to wear the mask. So both in the same location. One thing we're running into, and we talked about this in our race director webinars, is that there are over 2,000 health departments in the U.S. and not a lot of them know a lot about bike racing. In Colorado, as an example, we're lucky enough to have been working with BRAC as well as Bicycle Colorado. In this case, the state health department has decided that masks specifically don't need to be worn during competition, but should be worn where it's mandated elsewhere. So again, we're not asking officials to, I think it helps to research this. It's that dialogue with the organizer about what those requirements are and how they're going to be enforced and the part. With that said, I'm taking a little look at Steve Brady asked, was there a field limit for the crit? And I believe that was 40 or 50. In that case, Stuart will jump in on chat. He worked with the organizer more than I did. And that was the mandate based on the local requirements. Colorado is an example. I know it's 25, but a county can ask for a exemption, and we did have a criterion here 2 weekends ago that had 50 rider field limits, required masks off the bike, but not on the bike, and they saw pretty good, over 90% compliance at the event, which was fantastic. It took a little bit of prodding to do, but they got there. So. Sally, thanks so much, and thanks for rushing home to jump on the phone to be with us. Tom Nee's going to take over, and again, it's that touch point between being an official and being a health inspector. So, Tom, you want to give us the sort of the NTC in your perspective?
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad to see all the different names here on the Zoom conference. We're all now experts in Zoom conferences, and I guess the sad thing for all of us, we like working with each other. So I hope at some point in time we'll be able to see each other at different events. You know, both Sally and Michael's cases have a number of common elements. I mean, the first thing for all of you is the RD, the race organizers, are working with USAC events. And there's always been a provision that race organizers can have special regulations, and that's what they're doing, is that they're working with the events group and saying that our local community has certain regulations on us in order that allow us to have the event. So what you heard from both of them is that they, as chief officials, are talking early with the RDs and talking about what those special regulations are. And that helped them figure out how to actually operate at the event. And again, you heard sort of that dichotomy between the organizers doing certain things and the race officials are doing the sporting aspects. So the sporting aspects are things like you heard from Michael. I mean, there, everybody had to have masks on. In the aspect of the sporting aspects of the time trial, well, the organizers already had separated everybody out, so Sally didn't have to do those things. So again, be sensitive to the divisions of labor. For those of you who are rule number gurus, or you have a writer comes up to you and asks me where is this in the rules, you have a couple rules that allow you to deal with the sporting aspects. You have 1 and 4 rules in the course where riders are supposed to be familiar with the rules of the race, right? So if you've worked with the race organizer before the event and they put it out there in the pre-race announcements, then yes, that's a rule of the event. And then you have 1 and 5, which is riders should follow the instructions of the race organizers, officials, and the police. So in Michael's example, you had a local health department requiring everybody to have masks on, right? So what are the actions that you would take? What Michael did. So the organizers required, as part of the USAC permit, to 1, to require the usage, but 2, to let everybody know it. So the chief referee and the organizer works on how it gets communicated to everybody. The sporting aspect is all the licensees should know that that's the case. Then you, as chief referee and the organizer, work out how do you work together during the event on this. And that way you don't have disputes during the event itself. And you know, in that case, Michael had that conversations with the race organizer. And I think Michael, and what you had recounted, the race organizer really didn't want to DQ anyone. And so you honored that in the way you handled things. Your wearing a mask, I think Tony Phillips had said inside the chat, the wearing of the mask is like wearing helmets, right? I mean, everybody's required to have helmets under the current regulations, and if there's a special regulation saying you have to have masks because that's what the community is requiring of events, then you could treat it like the helmet rule. In the same way that if someone is in violation of those requirements to have the race, it is possible that they are not allowed to participate. Again, after the event, Michael communicated back with Chuck right away that this was an unusual situation, and that gave Chuck an understanding what's happening out there, and he was able to validate that those were the right steps. Good. Chuck, do you want me to go through participant limits?
No, I think we're good with
Okay,
that.
good.
We built a couple case studies for you all that we're gonna send out in a memo, as I mentioned, just to give you a sort of an idea. I always feel like I function better with, here's a scenario and how would it be handled kind of thing to provide guidance. And again, we're here to work with the officials in the lead up to the event and help you out. And believe me, Stuart is talking to these organizers very, very regularly. I think it's 75% of his time right now. A question did come up from Olga about the how protest should be handled post-event. If you've not done it, we do have a COVID-19 booklet, Return to Riding and Racing. If you go to the top of the USA Cycling website, there's a gray bar. I think it's still gray there today. You click here and it takes you to our resource page. Just peruse through that. There's some great documents. There's webinars we've done with organizers. We're doing those about every 2 weeks. And in that, there's the Return to Riding and Racing booklet. We do address it in there. The main thing is, the best thing is that it's not done over the shoulder of the chief judge, as we see all the time. One suggestion is that you the organizer provides a phone number, and that is utilized to file a protest. We also, we're going to talk about this in a memo, are open to reasonable changes to USAC regulations for health and safety reasons. So if that 15-minute period needs to be extended because of the electronic back and forth and reposting, these are all things that are acceptable. The main thing is just to make sure this communication is done with the participants as far ahead of time as possible. And Sally, I'm having a little trouble unmuting you. I think I just got it. Do you mind talking about what you guys do at T-Town?
For protests?
Yeah, is there a procedure to handle them there?
There really weren't any. Everything's a time trial, really. They're just there for time. It's not, we haven't had any issues. They're doing everything online, and they can always email us if there are any questions, and it's pretty simple.
Okay. Yeah, we have seen the phone number system used as well. So thanks for that. And going to move on to a couple more items. I want to talk a little about official safety. These are just some general guidelines, and we took these from the guidance that we're giving to, we have a lot of clubs and teams talking about group riding. These are some things we developed that we felt club members or team members could agree to if they do go ride together, that you sort of agree to this code of conduct. But I thought these were very relevant to where we are. So some points. Number one, be symptom free for 14 days before you go into an event. I didn't put the links in here. They are in the memo, but we've got a list of all the symptoms which seem to change and be expanded over the last month or two. But be familiar with those. If you have any of these or you feel sick, do not go to the bike race. Whether it's COVID-19 or the flu, no one wants you there sick. You don't want to be there sick, and you don't want anybody sick. So I think that's number one. Officials who may have a heightened risk factor probably want to reconsider whether they want to attend some events or all events. And that goes for society in general. My mom is in a couple risk categories and does not want to go to the grocery store. And I think that's a super wise decision. We are asking officials who've engaged in an activity that put them at risk should not participate. If you've been nightclubbing without a mask in Florida right now, we don't want you going to a bike race. One thing I do want to point out is it's absolutely okay to turn down an assignment. You will not be judged. You will not be put on assignments in the future. That is your decision, whether you're in a risk category or you feel uncomfortable or you're sick. Don't go if you don't want to. We're not going to hold that against you. All that we ask as normal is try to let folks know as far out as possible so we can find a replacement. Certainly if you're sick the day before, if you come down with a cough and fever, we don't want you at the event. You shouldn't be there, and communicate that to your crew and let them know. Just on mask usage, personally, I would not go to an event. I don't go to the grocery store, whatever, without a mask. And we are strongly encouraging all of you to wear them. If it is mandated by local health department or the event special regulation, it becomes mandatory. And I think we're seeing more and more locations go to mandatory mask requirement. Just like if you're at the grocery store or somewhere else you can't social distance, that's going to be an item that we're encouraging strongly and requiring in certain locations. I'm going to try to catch up with a couple questions. Michael, I'll let you in chat maybe respond to Erica about the crit you did and whether that was protested or not. I'm trying to go, God, you guys are typing too quickly here. One question was about screening. We're not doing that, but I will tell you in a lot of areas, Colorado is an example. If there is a positive, the event is required to work with the health department. It's in our new policies here that you're required to provide the contact information for that rider and along with any riders in that group. So if someone in a master's race came down with COVID signs and symptoms or was diagnosed, that the health department is the one that actually does the contact tracing, but the event would provide the contact for everybody who's in that event with them. We have looked at some contact tracing, whether to email people. It's a super complicated and not easy answer in speaking with our health folks, but that's something we're definitely continuing to look at. So I'll let you guys, sounds like there's some good chat going about how Michael disqualified this person, but if you have any questions about the official safety, you can reach us one-on-one. Again, I want to point out, again, don't feel like you're going to go on some blacklist because you turn an assignment down. I prefer you turn it down and let us know than go and be uncomfortable. It's not a good working condition to be in. All right, we have our task force up and working, and I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie, who is heading the assignment process, but she is going to speak for everybody else. One question Suzanne asked, are there USAC masks? Yes, we're selling them. And I made a note earlier, I'm not promising, but I'll try to see what I can do about a discount for officials on that. They're very nice. So the money does go to our junior women and the USAC Foundation. So Bonnie, I'm going to let you take it over. Number one, those of you on the task force, we've gotten great feedback, and the folks have passed on the information to us. And just because we're not acting immediately, don't think we're not noting it. We're just under some bandwidth constrictions right now. So Bonnie, you may be able to unmute yourself.
I'm there.
All right, I'll let you go to it.
All right. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to try to do justice for Sarah and Dot's groups as well. We've kind of been working closely on this as well, so hopefully I have everything I need to talk about their task force. If you guys were on the earlier official session that we did in April, one of the things that we set up was these three task force: education, rethinking the assignment process, and culture and community. And we opened them up to anybody who was interested in participating to let us know. So we've got a really good group of people. Each task force ranges in size from about 15 to 30 officials, depending on the group. There's cross-country representation as well as officiating experience. So we've got good rounded groups on all three of them. Once we complete our work on these task force, we're going to send proposals to USA Cycling to identify our findings and recommendations for steps going forward. Most of these will kind of be work in progress, and things will continue to be done on them going forward, but we're really trying to get the meat of the work done up front and get that rolling. So while there's still some work that we have to do, we wanted to just give you guys an update on where the groups are at, the work that they've been doing, and what we've been discussing. So I'll start with the first one, the education, which is led by Sarah. This task force is essentially doing an analysis on the current education programs that we offer for officials. And they kind of looked at it from 3 different categories. So they looked at what works, what's not working, and then what's missing, and kind of drilled down on each of those areas. So from the what works perspective, everybody was extremely happy with the Road B upgrade modules that we've put into place over the last several years. For those of you who aren't familiar with them, they're all competency based, and they have like a self-directed design. So we use Google Sheets. We set up the forms for the official to step through and do a self-assessment on their skills. They get feedback from other people that they work with. And then when they get to a certain percentage, they're eligible at that point to upgrade to a category B. So anybody that's a category C and is interested, you can reach out to any of us on the Tech Commission or Chuck, or send an email to the officials at usacycling.org, and we can get you set up on that. The other thing everybody liked is Sarah had put together kind of a train the trainer course, which is to kind of get consistency across some of the classes that we're teaching. So whether we're teaching it in New York or whether it's being taught in Southern California, we're trying to get a good feel for how we want the class to be brought towards the students, how we want to proceed in the class, what the goal of the class is. So everybody kind of has that same feel. And it kind of goes along with the new way that we're starting to teach our classes. And then the category C class that was redone a few years back has gotten really, really great reviews as well. So from a what's not working perspective, and some of these are tied to education and some of them can be tied into education in a way. One big one that stood out was the upgrade path for the motor referees. We haven't really had that in place for a while now, but as you'll see later on in our discussion, Chuck will talk about what his plans are for that. We also they talked about having the lack of officials in certain areas and how to retain officials. So that seemed to be a problem. From the what's missing perspective, there was a quote that we lose approximately 50% of our category officials after about 2 years of working. And some of the belief behind that is that's basically due to the lack of communication and the clarity on how or why or what they should be doing if they want to progress. So we have some work to do in that area. There's obviously some track training that we've been missing. We're missing mountain bike training across the board. We're also have that on our plate to tackle and get some headway on there. Additional information on how to use the Road B module. So while they're out there, and if you're very tech savvy, it shouldn't be too much of a stretch for you, but we realize not everybody's on the same level when it comes to that. So there's been some talk about putting a little bit more training around how somebody would get started on these. Have the ability to access the career path information. So give people an idea of where they can go with their officiating career. Okay, now you're a category C, what does that mean? Also, we want to do continue to do some more ongoing, consistent, and honest feedback and recognition across the board for officials. Offer additional training for all officials regarding mentorships. How do they get involved if they really want to advance and they just don't know what that next level is or what the steps are to get there. And then set up the expectation and guidance about working as a team of officials. So if you get your first bigger assignment or even your first local assignment, you may not be working with all of your friends. You may be a person that goes into a race and you're working with 4 other people or 5 other people that you've never met before. So how do you approach that and you know, give you some guidance around how to handle that on race day. So that's basically the education task force in a nutshell. Moving on to rethinking the assignment process. So this is the group that I headed up. And the focus of this task force was to look at the technology currently being used to make assignments and whether those are local or national. And then also understand what the process was that was being used and see if there's something that we could improve upon there. So starting with the technology, one of the things we did is we identified a variety of tools that are currently being used to make assignments. And there were things ranging from spreadsheets, some organizations or associations use emails, some people use more formal tools like USA Cycling's OAT tool, or the usacycling-officials.org site for scheduling officials. So we kind of drilled down into those, looked at those, talked about what we liked, what we didn't. We focused on, or we are still focusing, we've pretty much got them wrapped up, but we tried to identify some high-level requirements and considerations for what we would like to see in an assignment tool. In regards to like usability, accessibility, and consistency. And we know that it's kind of critical that we definitely have it available for a national level, but we also see the need that it needs to be able to scale down to the local level as well. And the one thing I want to point out is just keep in mind, USA Cycling is not trying to mandate we use one tool across the board. I know there's a lot of associations that have a process in place and it works great for them, and that's wonderful. We definitely need something to handle the national level assignments, and so that's kind of where we're starting this at. But if we're going to be building something or looking into a tool that we want to invest in, we want to also make sure that it can be something that can be scaled down to the local level if needed. And then the other thing of the task force was looking at the process that we use for assignments. So we had a lot of discussion around this, and it came down to a few things: transparency, excuse me, and then fairness and consistency. So there's a lot of concern that we need to have more transparency into how the actual assignments are being made at the local and national level, and who's responsible for making them. So not everybody is aware of that information. We need to have an understanding of the skill sets that are being taken into consideration when the assignments are being made for a particular level of race or even a particular position on a crew. Does it require a certain category of official to be able to apply for that? We talked about new officials and how they gain experience and confidence to advance in their career path, while also taking into account the needs of the existing officials that have been around and working as an official for many years. I mean, how do we keep them active and in the sport? So we have a lot of things that we're looking at in those areas. And one of the things we did do is we kind of developed a goal around the process stuff to kind of give us, take these talking points that we're putting together and try to build something so that we could present to USA Cycling. And so the goal for that was stated as to deliver a clearly articulated assignment process that is based on the principles of transparency, fairness, and consistency, which is flexible enough to ensure that the needs of officials and race organizers are taken into account. So it's something that's a high level, and then we have the various talking points and bullets that we can put under that to support it for USA Cycling. And then the last thing we did on the task force is look at some best practices around the assignment process. So whether that was looking at the assignment of the actual officiating crew in regards to how many officials do you need, what are the key communication points, what are the standards for the events and the roles. We also looked at working specifically with the race directors. How do we provide the necessary level of officiating for the event without sacrificing the crew? Meaning, you know, if it's a UCI level event, we can't really populate it with all like category C level officials. So trying to balance that and work with the race director on cost to understand, you know, what the importance of that is. And as I mentioned, cost, there's a lot of concern over the past several years with the race directors thinking the officials are their biggest expense. And while we are expensive, as an official, you guys realize that we really don't make that much money, but yet at the end of the day, when the bill is presented to them, it seems like a lot. So working with them on that, also making sure like insurance and stuff is in place. And then moving on to the culture and community task force, which was is being led by Dot. So they've been looking at this across, what does this mean across our officials organization? So from a culture perspective, some of the key points that they came up with is they said that officials are too often seen by riders and organizers as the enemy. So we need to improve our consistency in how we apply the rules, regardless of where the race is or the level of the race. Additional focus on mentoring at local and regional level events, having nationally trained mentors who could possibly come in, bring consistency with regards to how to mentor and how to develop proper officiating attitude and presentation. And then in addition, officials enforcing rules shouldn't be the rider's introduction to a regulation. So I think everybody that's probably on this call has probably experienced at one time or another at a race where they've invoked a rule to a rider or a regulation against a rider and the rider had no idea what they were talking about. So some of the suggestions that are coming up is that maybe riders could take like not necessarily a test to pass, but just kind of like an easy, simple test whenever they go to upgrade and say, you know, answer these questions, just kind of as a consistent learning process. And then from a community perspective, it seems that our group is not very diverse. We need to do some things and look at that and see how we can improve in that area. At the national level, we're recommending the continuation of the biannual symposium for continued education and also as a great way of building a sense of community. Communication is the key, as you guys know, and so we'd like to continue to see like the tech director updates that come out. We just want to see them on a more consistent basis. So we've done fairly good in the past. They'll get going once a month and then they kind of slack off for a little while. We also want to see we want to continue to recognize officials for the job that they're doing. So things like the National Official of the Year or the introduction into the Hall of Fame, we think those are things that are still important and we should continue to do those. And then more at the regional and local level, there seems to be a lot of segregation across the disciplines. So whether it's road or track or mountain biking, it's like each group kind of keeps to themselves. So we want to try to provide and encourage more opportunity to cross-associate with or cross-pollinate with each of those disciplines. And then from a socializing perspective, a lot of people realize that part of working a bike race, a multi-day bike race, part of the fun is actually being able to spend time with your co-officials in the evening or in the morning. So bringing the crew together after the event, having an annual party and recognizing like regional or local official of the year, or maybe just having an annual rules update seminar all help with building that community. So these are just a few things that we've been doing within the task force themselves. So I don't know if there's anybody that has any particular questions. I guess if you do, you're putting them on the chat session, but that's pretty much the summary that I have.
Great, thanks, Bonnie. I want to again thank everybody. We've had a lot of people involved in those groups, which is great. Just a couple things to carry over what Bonnie said. We talked internally about how we get new riders knowledgeable of the rules. And I think a lot of you know we're going to a novice rider format where we're going to treat them a little more gingerly. But as they move out of that up into the Cat 4 or the Cat 2 in mountain bike, maybe we offer a very basic test on rules and they get an upgrade point if they take it. I think people will be beating each other up to take that. One thing is just making people know that the rule book and regulations are available as they make those moves up would be a good start with that. So we've started those discussions. Tara's going to put up a link in chat here as well. One thing we instituted with the event organizers is an event organizer forum. We've had a bit of a mailing list going back and forth, which Dot's helped with the officials, but we are going to look at either expanding this existing forum or creating one for officials to allow you all to share best tips, the stuff we do at races or on the phone or via email, but allow something for the local community. The event organizer forum took us a bit to get set up, so we won't be able to turn this on tomorrow, but it's something that our staff's going to look at to have you all do. Take a look at that organizer forum. It's becoming moderately active in the last couple of weeks, and we will work to get that instituted here. Tara's also going to put up the COVID-19 resource page link so that everyone has that, and that'll go up in chat as well. And again, you can find that at the bar on top of the website. Bonnie, thanks for the recap, and thanks to you and Dot and Sarah for jumping on those. I know there's some more meetings yet to come. I want to give a quick training update. We're getting closer at our hour, but I'll make this pretty quick. We had promised some classes coming up, and we're doing them. First, the Cat B road upgrade. What we decided to do is, I don't want this to sound negative, but because this is the first time we sort of handpicked people to go through a test class, and speaking with Sarah, there is some room left in that. So if you are interested, her email is up there, the iamsarahrodney@gmail.com. If you can't remember that, send something to that official's email, and I'll make sure she gets it. It's going to be a combination of pre-work and Zoom, just like we're doing now with interaction. And I have faith that's going to be pretty cool. So track secretary class, Maureen has been developing that. We are about ready to launch that. It's going to be it's going to be 4 2-hour Zoom sessions with homework. You have to be on the track with 2 years of experience. She is going to allow folks to sit in if space permits. Basically, this is preparation to serve as secretary for high-end events like national championships. If you have interest in that, instead of just throwing the date out, because the way we're doing this, if you have interest and meet those criteria, send an email to officials@usacycling.org. And what we're going to do is build that list and send everybody a poll to find out sort of what time of day and what times work, and provide you more information there. But Maureen is raring to go on that. The Road Motor C class, I'm a glutton for punishment, so I'm going to wipe this out in one 5-hour session with some breaks in it. I've done it before. It's painful, but it works. And we'll have some pre-work to try to knock that down. Just as with the in-person Motor C, it's open to currently licensed officials, so you have to be at least a C. And to get the motorcycle endorsement, you need a current motorcycle license or endorsement on your driver's license for motorcycle. And that'll make you a category C motor if you successfully take the class. We do open this up for folks who don't have that. It's a pretty cool class, and you'll be able to take it and get a P for passenger designation. So if you're interested, send that to me. I'm going to be teaching that one. And send it to that same officials@usacycling.org. Once I get probably 6 to 8 folks, I'm going to send a doodle pool out and get some dates that work and go from there. So we are, as Bonnie mentioned, working on basically what we're going to do with Motor A's in the future, since the UCI has changed the format for how motors work. And look at revising the Motor B as well. And that's basically to integrate with the sort of new normal. Also, we have looked at our next Elite National Commissary classes for road and track. If you do have interest, feel free to drop me a note in the officials. We need to have a decent portion of folks to get those going. So we'll carry those through as needed. Finally, I open it up. We are running a little short on time, and it's Friday afternoon. So I'm going to open it up to chat. And if you need to unmute yourself and ask a question, I think it's probably safe with this size group and all you being race officials to go ahead and do that. So I think we've answered a ton of stuff in the chat function. And feel free to be typing those in or asking a question. Dan asked, did he miss A upgrade? Dan, I assume that is for Road A. And in speaking with Randy before we started layoffs and furloughs, he was not going to do an A class. But again, if you're interested, feel free to bug me. We have had that class in person at events, which seems to have been pretty well received because we're able to take people to time trial starts and put them in time cars. Michael Dupay, who talked earlier, got to sit in my car at an event once when he was going through his. And I think that's a valuable experience. So feel free to bug me about that. I'll get a list going. Susan asked about apprentices. Susan, we actually need national level events before we do apprentices. Unfortunately, a ton has been canceled, but we're still committed to do that. I particularly think our national championships are a great opportunity for an official under not the pressure of a super large event, but still being serious to have apprentices. And we did that last year and the year before, and we'll continue that. We got to have some national championships first, unfortunately. But definitely noted, and Bonnie and Dot, who've been helping with assignments, have, are reading that. So any other questions? All right, well, I'm going to, we're going to make this available, this recording, on the resources page again, and provide information. I got asked a little bit about a tech director update. You know, we are going to probably pivot more towards doing these more often and recording them and making them available. And I think going to sort of shorter snippets out to the officials community and call them officials updates instead of technical director updates. Steve asked for a time frame for the, I think that's probably ENC class, Steve, the Elite National Commissaire. We do not have one scheduled, so if you're interested, email me, and I will work on, is we have enough people to do that. We have been working pretty closely with the UCI on their training and have offered up our facility and our expertise, but obviously there's travel considerations right now. All right, with that, I think we're gonna call it a meeting. I hope everybody appreciated and enjoyed this, and it was good to at least see people on Zoom, if not at bike races. So everybody, please be safe. And again, if you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Thanks a bunch.